everyone. Hello, committee. Welcome to K-12 Education Budget, and we're going to get rolling. Do we have any requests for bill introductions? No requests for bill introductions. All right, we'll move on. I do want to introduce you to my new committee assistant. Now, don't worry. This is going to be a great situation here. And Spencer, would you like to introduce yourselves to the committee? Tell them anything you want to say.
Hi, I'm Spencer Haddock, new committee assistant, obviously, for Representative Williams in the K-12 Education Budget Committee, and I'm a student at BYU University out in Utah, but I'm home for the semester working as a committee assistant, so that's about it.
We are really glad to have you, and committee wants you to note the daily agenda. It is perfect, and it's here, and so you didn't do that? Oh, okay, don't say anything. Oh, I like that. He's very humble. All right, so you'll have that agenda ready for you. Also note the weekly agenda will be updated, and it will have the bill number for the Special Committee of Education Funding. And that will be on Monday. You can turn in your testimony tomorrow. We prefer 48 hours, but when you don't have 48 hours to turn it in, then of course it's 24 hours. And so Spencer will be doing that. Do remember to check the committee rules. I strongly recommend that you read the committee rules. Generally, we do not get our testimony in a format that is actually parallel with or compliant with the committee rules, because we like to have your name at the top. We like to have your email, your contact information, who you represent, and if you're proponent, opponent, or neutral. So please, please look at the conferee committee rules. Also note it's k.12.budget@house.ks.gov to send your testimony. If you want to be abundantly certain, you can also copy me, and you can also copy Spencer, but Spencer's the one that will be looking at the K-12 testimony page for your testimony. So there we have it. All right, committee, so we are going to have a hearing today on House Bill 2514, and before we open it, I will invite our reviser to provide an overview. The bill was provided yesterday on your desk, so if you brought it with you, you're in good shape.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So members of the committee, House Bill 2514 would amend the school district open enrollment statutes. And at the top of my memo, you can see just what generally these statutes do, or these amendments will do, and then I'll get into a little more detail. So generally, this bill will prioritize students who reside in Kansas over those students who reside in another state through the open enrollment process. It will authorize non-resident students to remain enrolled in a school district of non-residents if that student attended school in this school year. If they're attending this school year, they get to remain enrolled. It will authorize school districts to deem non-resident students as not in good standing prior to that student ever entering the school. And it will also require each school district to publish their open enrollment policies on the school district's website. So let's start with the priority for Kansas residents. This bill creates this priority through kind of two ways in the law. So the first way is it amends the definition of a non-resident student in the open enrollment definitions. This definition is amended to make this term non-resident student only apply to students who reside in Kansas. And so only Kansas students would be subject to the open enrollment processes. And school districts would only be doing the open enrollment processes with Kansas students. Secondly, the bill creates a new section of law that would require school districts to give priority to students who reside in Kansas over students who reside in another state by requiring school districts to consider out-of-state student applications. These would be individual student applications coming from an out-of-state student only if the school district has open seats that remain after the completion of the open enrollment process that occurs through the open enrollment law with, as this bill will do, with Kansas residents. Notwithstanding that in-state priority over out-of-state student priority, the bill does authorize any school district to permit a student who resides out of the state of Kansas to go ahead and attend a school district in this state if that student is the child of a parent who is employed by the school district. So if somebody's employed by the school district who lives out of state, their child can come with them to that school district and be accepted for enrollment, notwithstanding that in-state priority. So next, the bill authorizes continued enrollment for certain students. Essentially, there was kind of an issue brought up by some parties that questioned whether certain students could remain enrolled in a non-resident school district if they were attending school as a non-resident student during this school year. So this bill clarifies that to state that any student who is attending school in this school year who's a non-resident student in that school district, they shall be permitted to continue their enrollment in that school district until the student graduates from high school without having to go through the open enrollment application process. And then similarly, any non-resident student who's accepted for enrollment after this school year or through the first open enrollment process, application process, any student who's accepted for enrollment shall also be permitted to continue their enrollment in that school district and not have to keep reapplying through the open enrollment process and be subject to an open seat lottery process. The next thing the bill does is it grants authority to school districts to deem certain students as not in good standing. This authority was already provided to school districts under the law. This bill would state that school districts can refuse to enroll a non-resident student if that district deems the non-resident student is not in good standing, even before that student touches the school district, even before they enter the school district's enrollment. And then also, the school district can also deem a student as not in good standing through their continued enrollment in the school district. Lastly, the bill does require that each school district is to publish the school district's open enrollment policy and then also any revisions that occur to such policy on the school district's website through a link on a district's website homepage titled the Open Enrollment Information link. And Madam Chair and committee members, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Nick. Questions for our revisor? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't have time to review the original bill, but it made provisions to give military families priority. And one of the things that occurs to me, having been a military family, is that sometimes families get orders when they're living out of state that they know that they're going to be moving to Kansas. And I'm wondering if this out-of-state student provision would create any difficulties for a military family. And it might take some thought and review.
So on page 2 of the bill, you see the priority starting in what's new subsection D down at the bottom of page 2, and then at the top of page 3, you'll see the priorities that are given in the law. And paragraph 2 does state that subject to capacity, school districts are to give priority to any non-resident student who is a military student, but that will change for these would be in-state military students.
Okay, so if somebody knew they were moving to Kansas, but they hadn't established residency yet, they wouldn't get that military priority with the revision of the bill?
Probably not.
Okay,
Probably not.
thank you.
So we might need to do a technical there or something like that.
However, if they know they're moving into the state, they need to first probably decide where they're going to live in the state. If they're a resident, it's not an issue. They get to attend that school. Otherwise, that would be an interesting situation for them to find a home and then choose another school district. They could certainly do it, but there's a time frame element as well. So something to consider. All right, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and proceed. Committee, I'll go ahead and open the hearing on House Bill 2514, revising school district open enrollment procedures and requirements to prioritize students who are residents of Kansas, and other items. First, we have proponent oral testimony, and we have Tavis. Then he is actually online today, so on WebEx, Tavis Desser-Myers from, welcome. Nimaha.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Williams and members of the House K-12 Education Budget Committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, sir. Proceed.
Great. Thank you. Again, thank you, Chairman Williams and members of the House K-12 Education Budget Committee for allowing me to testify and accommodate me in my request to do this via satellite. Today, I am speaking as a proponent for House Bill 2514 to clarify some of the language that non-resident students in good standing enrolled in the 23-24 school year shall be permitted to continue enrollment until graduation. Normally, rural school districts such as ours, USD 115, would be able to accommodate all of the requests. Right now, we are currently operating at full capacity, and we are in the process of completing the construction of several classrooms to allow for more students. What this bill currently means for our interpretation, for what KSB has interpreted, they state that we do not see an avenue allowing for differential treatment of current out-of-district students in the initial selection process. So what this means under KSA 72-3123 is that next year's enrollment, when we go to do enrollment, all students that are out of district would go into a lottery system to be selected to determine at what your capacity is. We currently have 97 out-of-district students that would go into that lottery system. Some of those students have been in our schools for 11 years, and they might have to face that lottery to determine if they will be allowed for their senior year. Right now, what USD 115 is asking for with this language is just so that it's cleaned up a little bit, and the part about that those students that are currently enrolled would be grandfathered in. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Since you are on WebEx, are there any questions for Tavis? All right, thank you so much for joining us today. Committee, we do have proponent written testimony. Please take note of that in your S drive or in your folder if you have one. Jim Howard from 335 North Jackson Heights Superintendent, and Jude Schwallenbach, Reason Foundation. So please take a moment to look at those. For our opponents, amazingly, we have 0. And so we'll move on to our neutral. Today we have 3 neutral testimonies, and we'll start with Jim Carlskent from United School Administrators. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. You know, we are here today to talk, you know, as a neutral proponent for 2514. You know, I do the clarification with respect to, you know, some of the interpretations of the bill as the proponents did indicate. But there's one thing that I'd like to bring up, and it has to do with accepting non-resident students, and even you know, that were not in good standing. And I think in consideration not only for non-resident students but resident students has to do with a student that's received a 186-day suspension or expulsion when they return, giving the school district the opportunity to place this student, if deemed by those by the district, in a virtual program. I think it would be helpful for the for those students currently enrolled in school, as well as, you know, the person coming in. That's one of the suggestions that I would like to make. And there's other things to consider with respect to accepting students coming in, cost, especially with respect to transportation when it comes to students with special needs. Those, you know, if those could be, you know, considered, I would certainly appreciate it as a representative of USA Kansas.
All right, thank you, Jim. And that certainly could be a possibility with an amendment. So thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have John Luth, Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. John Luth, Deputy State Director, Americans for Prosperity, Kansas. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. We are as a neutral on the bill. Many great things in this bill, and we were incredibly proud to support the original open enrollment bill that helped take Kansas from some of the worst open enrollment laws in the country to some of the best. And so appreciate all the hard work this committee did on that bill at the time. The one provision within the bill we are just asking the committee to take some deep consideration of is the expansion of the ability to reject a student for good standing. In particular, our concern is thinking through those students who, maybe they appear to be in bad standing due to a significant number of absences from classes, but we find out that, that student's bullies for the past 5 years are in those classes, and that's why they don't go there. So a different educational environment potentially opens them up to greater success and opportunity. And so that is ultimately just our ask for the committee, is make sure we don't have any unintended consequences there, allowing perhaps bad actors or bad choices to be made, and helping those students who truly could thrive in a different educational environment than they currently find themselves in, which is what our current bill, we feel, helps do. So with that, I will keep it pretty short and sweet on that front. So open for any questions should the committee have them.
All right, thank you, John. Next committee, we have Leah Fleiter, KASV, and Leah. And I will note it is Fleiter, not Flitter. I did not do that, Leah, by the way. And it wasn't you. It was from before. So
It happens all the time.
Spencer, it wasn't you. I just wanted to bring it up because I didn't want her to feel like that we were doing that on purpose. So
It happens all the time, and I frequently get texts from people, the leaf filter, the gutter guard ads. People ask me if that's my side hustle as well. So thank you for that, but no worries, happens all the time. So I think this is the third time in this committee in this week that I've been able to appear as neutral. So that's wonderful. So we are, I think it's a record. So our testimony, as always, is based on our member-firm policy. Now, I will note that our members asked us to support the amendment or even the elimination of the open enrollment provision, and you can read that there. So we do greatly appreciate that this bill clarifies that school districts may deny continuing enrollment to an out-of-district student who is no longer in good standing. That has been, in many cases, a safety concern that our districts were expressing to us almost since the ink was dry on the law. And so we appreciate that this bill addresses that. And I imagine that many of you have heard from constituents, and so kudos to you for listening and drafting this bill. So, of course, we, again, would prefer that the open enrollment law be repealed entirely, but if that is not going to be the case, we would like to suggest some additional amendments as follows. So we would like to suggest adjusting the time frame for accepting the non-resident students. The current law opens the enrollment lottery in June and July. Those of you who might be involved in school district work know that families typically enroll in August. And sometimes, even though we think our families are coming back, our in-district families are coming back in August, we've got those people who school starts on August 15th and they register their kids on August 16th, right? And so it's just in order to make sure that the in-district students are receiving the priorities that they deserve as taxpayers or as children of taxpayers, we would like to see that clarified to adjust that lottery position. And then similar to Dr. Carlskint's comments, our members would greatly appreciate some clarity around special education students and who's responsible for transporting them. So I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
all right, thank you. I can answer that question. That is the responsibility of the parents. We do pay for full special education transportation and additional when they are in the district. So we do not pay for any student to be transported unless they are homeless. We will, but they get their full transportation when they remain in their district.
So a clarification in the bill that an out-of-district student, that the responsibility for transportation of an out-of-district student rests with the parents would be a clarification that would be very helpful for our districts.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Questions, committee, for anybody that is providing neutral testimony? Yes, Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Fleiter, if you would kindly step back to the microphone, please. My question is, as far as a timeline, do you have an ideal date in mind? You said most,
Well,
August?
probably
First.
August,
Okay.
Because then I think we could work with our families and say, hey, we really need to make sure that you enroll by, let's say, August 1st. And, that would give us all something to aim for.
Okay.
Certainly worth discussion.
All right, thank you.
Before you go, Representative Johnson, I'm going to piggyback on that. They set their numbers, Nick. They need to have their numbers set, and that's during the budgeting process. What date is that? I will have to look that up real quick.
So that's on or before May 1st.
Okay, so when they're putting together their budgets for the next year, by May 1st, they're setting a number. And truly, though, that is a reality that you're expressing. It's a reality with or without open enrollment. You just don't know until the end. My fear is if you put the time frame in August, there wouldn't be enough time for those families to then scramble and enroll in their resident district or make other accommodations. So that's where it gets tricky, and that's where we lean on the school districts to practice what they've constantly practiced, which is some very careful planning for the adjustment of numbers. Though nothing is perfect. Representative Johnson, who would you like to ask a question to?
Thank you, Chair. Jim Carlskin.
Okay.
For those that may not or are still new, Jim has served in our legislature and was former superintendent in my area, so I rely on his ideas very well. So we mentioned the expulsion, the ability to deal with expulsions, correct?
When a student returns from an expulsion, that's what I'm referring to on the one, after an expulsion, or it's referred to oftentimes as 186 days. When they return, each student's situation needs to be taken differently, but I think it would help the district if, and the students currently, that attend school there, the safety of them, if a consideration could be given, if that student would be best in a virtual situation.
Have you already been approached by any administrators?
Yes. I have been approached
Okay.
by school district superintendents and principals.
Would you be comfortable with a separate bill? And I just will say I have a bill pending for this issue.
That would be fine. I think it would probably be, bundled, to be honest with you, is probably, combined. So, that's up to the chair and the powers that be, but I do think the issue needs to be addressed.
And I really appreciate you bringing that up here today because I'm just waiting on the revisor right now.
Okay. Just on a side note, I was a part of this committee when I was here. So
That's right.
Before I was.
that's right.
That's right. I never was on an education committee. So to that note, you can always use something that's been structured and use it as an amendment. That's a possibility. The other thing, since you're here, you both may know this, or Nick, on that topic, is there a requirement before the 186 days, before a student goes back into a district after expulsion, to have a hearing? Or is it an automatic admittance?
Practice is usually a hearing.
Okay, I was going to say, regardless of whether the virtual became law or not, I would think that the child and his parents would want an opportunity to have a hearing before the school board or a private meeting or an interview or something of that nature. So something.
I can just say the revisor has already addressed that issue. We'll talk later, but
Okay.
just thank you very much, Jim.
Well, thank you, Representative Johnson. You are on it. So there we go. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a lot of concerns about this bill, and I was honestly a little surprised that it passed in the first place. I'm new, if you all don't know. I'd like to go back to the transportation costs and get a little clarification. My understanding is that federal law requires, number one, that we can't ask, are you a special ed kid or free and reduced or ESL when they're applying? Is that correct? Because of a discrimination.
Well, we're not asking him. This bill has nothing to do with it. It's all students have to have their own transportation if they elect to go outside of the district, just like all students have to provide their own transportation if they elect to not use a government school. So that is it. There's no question that has to be asked. There's no requirement in this bill that a student be asked any questions that relate to that.
I'm not sure we're communicating very well. My understanding was that federal law would prohibit districts from discriminating by asking ahead of time. And you're saying we won't. But then my other question is, my understanding is that districts are on the hook for transportation for special ed kids because of federal reasons. Am I wrong about that? I'm not sure.
We've talked extensively about it, and open enrollment exists in a lot of states. I think in around 30 some states as well. And so unless it were challenged in court, I am not aware of a challenge in court. It's not something that I understand, having talked to legislators in many other states, both blue and red, that they're able to do that. So again, it's incumbent upon the parent. If the parent wants the full services, they need to stay in their resident district. And so this is not something that we're asking our districts to do, nor do we believe that the districts are liable for it. However, everything is open to or subject to scrutiny in a court of law.
That's news to me, so that's good. Can I have one more follow-up question? My school district where my children attend is Olathe Public Schools, and we are really exceptional at a lot of things, including special ed. Will we build something into our formula to help account for some, I mean, I understand that once they're enrolled, they get funding accordingly, but it's very hard for them to plan for staffing, and special ed's already hard to fill. So have we accounted for that in this committee? I'm sincerely asking, I don't know.
Sure. So first of all, you're correct. You're not going to be able to have a policy where you ask someone, are you a special education student or not? That would be discriminatory, and that would be the wrong thing to do regardless. Second of all, you build your capacity, and we do not wait students. We do not have a student waiting for special education. So if they were pulled in the lottery and they were selected to attend Olathe, then at that point, then that student, if you had to hire more teachers, paras, counselors, your teacher entitlement in Olathe will go up, and you will get more money. You will get more special education state aid. In addition to that, that student doesn't just qualify for special education funding. They also qualify for at-risk funding. They qualify for a whole host of other types of funding. And they also bring with them the base aid, unfortunately, not the year that they are enrolled. It might take 1 or 2 years, depending on what we have ultimately. But those students do bring dollars to the district that make a big difference for that district.
I just think it might, compound some of our staffing issues. But I do appreciate that clarification.
Sure. Ultimately, the districts are in the front seat. They get to decide their capacity. If districts do not believe that they have the ability to fulfill additional capacity, then they will not take additional students. But what we've heard in this testimony are literally lots of school districts that are saying we have declining enrollment. For those districts, I would think that they would be excited to have more students and the opportunity to grow and not shrink. Olathe is not really growing right now, but they hope to grow. So, or at least they're kind of flat right now. Also, I just add, because oftentimes we look for a problem before it exists. And we've been pushing this off, and now we're finally approaching when it's implemented. But as I've mentioned before, travel to Colorado, talk to Colorado parents. They've had this for a couple dozen years, from what I understand. I don't know when it was first implemented. There are no rules It doesn't matter where you live in Colorado. You can go to any school you want to, and it's not an issue. So I think we're making a whole lot of nothing out of, we're making a whole lot of something out of nothing, and we don't even know yet. So I wouldn't underestimate our school district's ability to create estimates, because they create estimates all the time. They never know how many.
Transportation
Representative,
piece was huge, so I appreciate that clarification.
you're welcome. Committee, any other questions? Yes, Representative Owsley.
Just one, and maybe for the revisor. If a student participates in this program and their IEP requires transportation, which district would then be responsible for covering the funding for that education? I'm sorry, I don't think I said that right. My head's in three spots.
Well, I mean, if an IEP requires transportation, that student should be getting transportation, no matter what. And if they're attending school in a non-resident school district, I know the law does state that a non-resident school district shall not be required to provide transportation. So the school districts might have to figure out how to get that student transported to the school district where they're provided services. I mean, amongst each other. I don't know.
How does that get resolved?
I mean, that was
The
kind
bill
of
wait.
is silent on it.
Yeah, okay. So I think at the end of the day, if that's on an IEP, then a parent has to make that determination, and there has to be open communication. That parent, when they are asking for open enrollment, there needs to be clear communication. Your child was selected. We do need to disclose that your IEP, it does say that your child needs transportation. This is something that the parent will have to provide, or you will have to stay in Olathe, or you have to stay in KCK. I think as long as before the child makes that move, the IEP is reviewed, the family has an opportunity to make that decision. I feel like that's open, honest communication. And, I don't know if there's been any case law on it, on that particular item.
You're changing an IEP, that's going to have to go through a due
No,
process.
no, I'm not saying you would change the IEP. I'm saying those parents will have to elect to either fulfill that portion of the IEP, or they will have to stay in, they get the opportunity to know their full special education services related to transportation are fulfilled in their resident district. They just need to know that, making that determination.
Like I said, if the IEP says the student shall be, if transportation is provided under the IEP, that student should be provided transportation under the IEP. And if they're going to change and have the parent provide transportation or something like that, they're going to have to convene an IEP team meeting to discuss that change. So.
And Madam Chair, if I could, Nick, would we risk running afoul of federal requirements if it wasn't resolved intra-district, between one district or another? Because I'm not positive that a parent providing the transportation would qualify.
Like I said, if an IEP says provide the student transportation, one of those school districts better be providing that student transportation under their IEP for those special education services.
And just for clarification, that's not spelled out in the bill.
The bill does say that a non-resident school district or a school district of non-residents shall not be required to provide transportation to a non-resident student. So it does state that within the law.
But it doesn't state who shall provide.
Not with regard to students on IEPs. Now, it's basically stating the current practice where if you're a non-resident student, the district isn't required to provide you with transportation, but IEPs probably change that analysis a little bit.
Well, let's go further with that, Nick. Right now, you can have an IEP and you can be in a private school. And it could say that perhaps you started in a public school and your IEP said that you will have transportation provided because you're outside 2.5 miles and your whatever that qualified you for special education required that. So in that case, that parent makes a choice that they want to take their child to, let's say, a parochial school. They still have that IEP and they still qualify for services, and that school district still receives that base aid. And special education funding for that student, but they must provide the services somewhere. They have to decide in their IEP. They have to decide collectively as the parent and as the school where that service is going to be provided. But they have selected to do so. They don't have, so in that case, Nick, a student that was supposed to provide transportation, but now they're electing to go to a private school somewhere else, does the school district now, are they required to provide that private school student transportation that was in their IEP? And their IEP is still bound.
So parent election to go to a private school is a different issue under special education law. So if
Okay.
a parent elects to go to a private school, that child's not going to be getting IEP services in the school district. They will be subject to, or they will be receiving equitable services, which is a lot smaller portion of money within the private schools within the school district. But that's not an IEP, that's more of a services plan. So if a parent makes the election to go to a private school, there's not going to be an IEP for that student. Now, if the
Are you
school
sure?
district, if the school district places that student in a private school, pursuant to the IEP team deciding that that's the appropriate placement for the provision of special education services, then the school district would be subject to the provisions of the IEP, including if there's a requirement for transportation to transport that student to and from the private school. But that's a school district choice. If the parent makes a choice, the whole analysis changes.
Okay, well, then I probably misunderstood. I thought the IEP is valid no matter where you are. You just have to determine where those services are provided. So for example, that school district wouldn't necessarily have to go to your private school, but they might and do in some cases. But the IEP would still be valid. But you're saying it's not valid.
If it's determined by the IEP team that is the appropriate placement for the student to provide them special education and related services, the IEP would be valid. Now, if the IEP team says that we are offering you services here at the school district and the parent elects to take that child to the private school thinking the private school will provide services better for that student, that IEP is not going to be valid anymore. That student's going to be subject to equitable services and a services plan, which isn't an IEP.
Okay. Jennifer, Melinda, if you would do us a favor, this came up, of course, when we first originally passed the bill out. We also did this back in this, checked other states to see what they were doing. And it seemed like, if I can recall back from 2 years ago, the other states had the same issue and were not providing it. I think if you could check for me, again, I think we're in the number of like 30-some states with open enrollment. If you could check on those states, who has open enrollment and what they do related to transportation, and is there any case history or anything that we could follow related to that? Because from NCSL and other organizations in which we've gone to and where we have inquired on this, it has, from what I've seen, and maybe it's changed in the past 2 years, transportation is required of the parent if they choose to take the student out of their resident school district. But if you could get us that information, we don't need to work this bill until we get more information related to that. Yes, Representative McNorton.
Just a clarification on my part. So an IEP that a student has in their resident district, is that with the district or is that with the state that has to follow that student to the other district? If you're following it. So is that IEP with the resident district goes to another school, they have to create another IEP for whatever services they're going to provide?
Yeah, so I think essentially if a student transfers to another school district or moves in state and is subject to an IEP, that school district has to basically accept that IEP and provide those services. But then they can convene an IEP team to then discuss the services and modify the IEP within that school district.
All right. Yes, Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little confused here because I thought we were taking testimony and asking questions of conferees, It seems like we've got into a whole discussion of special ed, which I didn't see anywheres in this bill or the changes to it. So I realize sometimes we like to go into the weeds, but it seems like we're way into them right now.
We are in the weeds, and I will take the blame for that because I tend to wander into the weeds quite easily. So with that, if there aren't any other questions, non-special educated related, we will take them. Otherwise, I will take the very kind hint to move on. So Representative McDonald.
I have one very quick question about virtual, maybe if you could take that. Not all districts offer virtual school, so as far as, and it's also not necessarily the best.
Representative, that's not on the bill either, so the virtual.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah, it'll be an amendment, so we'll deal with that later.
Thank you.
I don't want Representative Hill to, scold me again, so. I know, that was also me venturing off there, so. Okay, if there are any other questions, all right, for conferees, thank you to everybody that provided testimony today, and thank you to Spencer and staff. With that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2514, and we are adjourned. Have a good weekend.